Hello and welcome to BIGFILMS tutorial in the destruction pack. Here we will recreate a scene you're familiar with from our promotional ad. We have our Shiro walking through this really cool disaster zone. In this tutorial, we're going to learn how to create the destruction effects in this apocalyptic scene. First, let's see the results on how it should look when we're finished. Now in this tutorial, we're going to show you how to key out a green screen, how to add all the destruction elements, and how to color grade the entire scene all in Premiere. Also, we'll show you how to add some motion to your scene when the camera itself is locked on a tripod. So if you take a look at the raw footage, you'll see the camera is static as our Shiro walks across the green screen. In this tutorial, you will learn how to achieve this next level effects in Premiere. So let's get started. Now that you know what the results will look like, let's begin with the first shot, our hero and the green screen. I'm going to drag and drop the raw footage into my timeline. First, I want to point out, as you see the raw and unedited version of the scene, we did it with a simple setup. Outside in the backyard with a green screen that we bought on Amazon and just a few friends. One big advantage to shooting this scene outside is that we use the sunlight as our main key or only source light. We did not use any fancy lighting setup, so if you're someone like many of us who don't have a budget to rent a fancy studio, all you have to do is go outside, find a good spot to set up your green screen and make sure you have really good friends, and then you go out there and shoot your scene. Okay, so the first step in building the scene, we want to mask everything that's outside the frame of the green screen. To achieve this, you want to go to your effects control panel, look down at the opacity, and you'll see your masking tool. And for this task, you want to use the pen tool. Click on it and activate that pen tool. Now before we key out the green screen, we want to first remove what's around the green screen. The way we do that is draw a simple shape around the borders, but make sure you're inside the edges of the green screen, like this. Don't worry if you don't get it perfect the first time, you can always modify and adjust the key points. Once you complete your mask, it automatically keys out the surroundings like this. Now that the surroundings are keyed out, you can adjust your mask by adjusting the key points. We always lean on being conservative, adjusting, masking more inside the green screen so that you don't take the risk just in case, you got some wind blowing and on the green screen kind of background slightly moves, or there's a little bit of ripples and stuff like that. So now that we're ready for the next step, let's test and see how well we removed the surrounding. To build the apocalyptic world that our Shiro is in, we have to add a background behind the green screen clip in our timeline. So here in my folder, I have a royalty-free stock footage of a desolate location where we're going to drag and drop this underneath the green screen clip like this, trim it down to size and match our main clip. Now I'm going to scale it so you can see the whole plate. Now you can see that we don't have anything around, or should I say outside the borders of the green screen. Now we're ready to key out this green screen. Keying out the green screen in Premiere is very easy. They've done a really good job providing a tool to do an effective key. Let's go to the Effects Control tab, look at Video Effects, and search for the keying folder or the keying menu here. Drop it down and you're looking for something called Ultra Key. Once you got it, drag and drop it right onto your main clip. Now once you apply this to your main clip, you'll see that it also applies into your Effects Control panel. Now you have full control of all the properties and makes it easy to do the keying. You also can see that at the moment nothing's been keyed out because by default the color is set to black, as you see here. You have to designate the color you want to key. The best way to do that is to select the eyedrop tool and hover over the green screen. But before you click your mouse or click to key out the colors, you want to make sure that you don't select areas that are too bright or too dark like here. You want to be more in the middle, kind of like this. Now of course this all depends on your actual lighting of the scene. Now we're ready to get rid of this green screen. So click on it and it vanishes. Okay, now this is looking pretty good, but as you can see here, we still have some fabric shadows of the green screen. Because we use fabric and not that stretchy pop-up green screens, there's some residue left over that we have to account for. So what we want to do is tweak the settings a bit. So let's go back to our Effects Control panel, look at the Ultra key, and you can see the composite is set to default. Let's see what our options are looking like. Let's drop down this menu. Let's try the aggressive, because here at BIGFILMS, that's what we do. We do things aggressively, okay? Okay, all right. Now let's click on it. And as you can see, the results look a lot better, right? It's already looking good, but we still have some shadows and residues to contend with. So let's go back to our Effects Control panel, and you can see here we have a menu option called Matte Generation. Click on it and it will reveal all its options. You can see that we have all these presets, but so let's start by changing the pedestal. As you see, when we change the value, the shadows are fading away. Now let's crank this up to 100. Now you can see most of the shadows are gone. This is looking good. We're on the right track. But if you kind of look over here in the right side, lower corner, we do have some shadows to take care of. And if you look at our Shiro, it's almost like she's looking at those shadows, like telling us, you're gonna take care of that? Yeah, and of course we are, we gotta do our thing. So as we go back to our effects control panel, we can play with the different options to see which one works best. Now keep in mind, if you're editing along with this tutorial, some of these values might be different for you depending on your scene, lighting, and your setup, but the steps are the same. So let's try the transparency. It's not working too well, or it's removing too much of the character, so clearly she won't be happy about that. But let's try the shadows, and of course that makes sense because that's what we want to remove, is the shadows. Boom, there we go. Okay, so you don't want to do too much because it bleeds into the actual character, so it just kind of looks weird, right? So it's like surgery. You want to be precise as much as you can without overdoing it. Awesome. Okay, so let's take the next step and adjust our Shiro. Just in case you've been wondering, no, we did not hire a giant actor to film with a tiny camera. As you can see here in this final result, she's a bit smaller. But before we adjust our Shiro, let's adjust the background by moving it up a little bit and have it more in the frame. Now we can click on the main clip, go to our effects control panel, and our motion settings, we can scale. Let's scale our Shiro way down into the little itty bitty girl, and we can click on the motion in the effects control panel to move her into the spot where we want her. Now imagine you can do this to real people in real life, right? The power of the editor. Okay, so maybe she's a little too small here, so we can scale her up a bit. So let's see how that'll look in the final result. All right, now we can adjust it a bit more. Boom, there you go, that's awesome. So right now she's walking, checking out the scenery. We got mountains back there. Nothing's really happening, right? But so now let's wreck this world here. But before we wreck the world, here's a little helpful hint that pays off in the long run. So one of the first things we like to do here in BIGFILMS as we build our destruction scene, we like to kind of color grade the elements and the environment around the character. This will help us a lot better as we build out the scene. In our effects control tab, search for the color correction tool. Let's locate the tint effect. Drag and drop the tint effect right into the background clip and you'll see how it'll make it fully black and white. But now we don't want it to be fully black and white. We just want to remove some of the colors, and keep in mind, we're going to color correct everything at the end. In order to color correct everything at once, we want to make sure we have all the same values and elements for all the layers as we add it to all the scenes. So you'll see what I mean. So as we adjust the tint values, if you look at the Shiro, you can see she looks kind of grayish, right? So we want to have the same tint on the background. So let's remove some of the colors from the background layers, about 50%, 51%. It looks kind of good to me here. Okay, so now we already have some great results, right? So she's walking, strolling, checking out the landscape. Now we're really ready to wreck this world. So let's start by adding the first destruction VFX file. I'm going back to my project bin. I have folders here populated with the VFX files from the destruction pack. As I open the folder, you'll see some of my choices here, right? So I think I'll start with the low angle bridge, but keep in mind, as you build your scene, ideally you want to start from the back to the front. So imagine you're placing VFX elements like a puzzle in the background and building your way forward to the foreground. So let's drag and drop the first VFX, our bridge that's crumbling. As you can see, the bridge is way too big here, right? Because all the VFX files are made in 4K and our actual footage is in regular HD. So in your effects control panel, we want to scale the VFX file down to about 50% and it fits the frame perfectly. But of course, if your footage you're editing with is in 4K, then you don't need to scale anything down. All right, so we want to position the bridge about here, right? So it's looking good. Now, here is an answer to a question I received via email and comments on our social media. How do we place the VFX behind the actor? Well, with the green screen that we keyed out, as you layer your VFX in your timeline, as you can see, is on top of our character, and we want to place it behind her. So all you have to do is take the main footage with our Shiro and place it above the VFX file like this. Boom. Now the VFX is behind the actor. The only way to achieve this illusion is filming your shot like your hero shot or your main video shot on a green screen. So now for this scene, We don't want the bridge to start intact. We want it already falling apart, already crumbling. So let's trim the VFX down to where the bridge is crumbling, right? Adjust the back end to trim it to fit our scene, fit our original footage timeline here. Okay, so that's looking good. Now, as you can see the color of the bridge, we want to add some tint effect to it like we did to the background layer so it doesn't look so magenta. So you can see a big difference between our Shiro, the environment, and the bridge. The details in your scene count so much. So as before, we grab the tint effect, apply it to the bridge, and then boom, it's in black and white. But let's adjust the values of the tint in our fresh control panel. Now in this case, the black and white works for us because the bridge is made of concrete. So let's set the value to about 80%. That's looking good. So we now have our first VFX that's looking great, and as you can see, the method of this edit workflow will be layering and stacking the video clips on top of each other. Now let's continue to add more destruction to the scene, right? The second effect we want to add is a house that's collapsing, causing all kind of ruckus. Now let's go back to our project bin, our VFX folder. This one is looking awesome. Now as I scrub through the clip, we can see the animation of the VFX itself. Let's drag and drop it right in, and we place it beneath our character, but actually what we want to do is put it in front of the bridge. So let's take these two clips, move them one layer up, then move the VFX clip of the bridge down and place the building in between. Now the building is standing in front of the bridge, but yet it's still behind our Shiro, who seems to be way too casual that suddenly a building showed up and crashed in front of her. Okay, so clearly the building is way too big, right? Let's scale it down. Let's come into the clip where the building is already collapsing. That's looking pretty good. Now that we have trimmed the clip, let's move the building into place. So we go to our Fetch Control panel, click on Motion, and you'll see the parameters of the clip show up, and we can move it into the spot we like. We can scale it up just a bit, slide it into our final position, and bam, there we go. Okay, now here's the sidebar. Some of you who are using the older version of Adobe Premiere have emailed me asking about these artifacts that show up with some VFX clips. There's nothing wrong with our VFX clip itself. It's a default setting in Adobe Premiere. So if you go to your project settings, click on General, you'll see your render is set to Mercury Playback GPU Acceleration, or CUDA. For some reason, when CUDA is set, it has some issues with opacities on smaller details like dust, lights, etc. So if you change it to software only, then press OK, give it a chance to calculate, and then boom, it's gone. But the only catch is that it'll make your project a little bit slower. So we recommend setting it back to CUDA, edit your scene, and before exporting, change the render setting like we just did to the Mercury Playback Engine software only. Now in the updated version of Adobe, you may not have to take these steps. And if you're using a different software, like let's say Final Cut, Filmora, Power Director, you don't have to worry about this. This is very exclusive to Adobe Premiere users. So now let's get back to our scene here, right? So now that we applied the building to the shot, we want to get it all set up. We want to apply the tint effect so it matches the colors of the scene. Now, instead of always searching for the tint effect, we can just take the tint effect already applied to the other clips, copy it, paste it right into our current clip, and it automatically applies all the color settings, and we can adjust the tint in the building accordingly, right? So we can change the values about 65%. That's looking good. The idea here is to make everything look a bit washed out, like a bit grayish. Now, this is a concept carried over from After Effects. When editing with visual effects, you want to have a look washed out. You want the log version of the shot. So when you're filming your scene, you want to set your camera to log. So when you capture the video in it and you put it into your editing software, it makes it easier for you and the editing software to have more control over the colors, or if you're using color LUTs and doing color correction. So you want the same kind of intensity of color and contrast for every element you're adding to the scene. Okay, so we have our building here that's collapsing. Looks really great. Let's use our razor tool to chop off the back end here. Let's scrub through it, looking sweet. Okay, next we want to add another building on the other side, right? Back in the VFX folder, we have a few choices. Added beneath our main clip but above the rest of the clip. So let's move the main clip up one layer, slide one beneath. As you see, the building is gigantic, right? So we need to scale it down and place it over here, and that's looking pretty sweet there. okay? We don't want it to cover too much of the bridge, right? We want to see what's happening behind the building. Okay, that's looking good. So now we want to trim the clip to where the building is already collapsing. Looking really good right here, right? Does a good job. You want to always try to get the perfect spot, right? It makes a huge difference. Bam, that's great. Let's use our razor tool to cut off the back end. We don't need that. Looking really nice. But as you know, we have to add some tint to this building, so we can apply the tint setting from the previous clip, paste it into our current building. Let's adjust the tint value a little bit. We don't have to go too gray. Here's a rule of thumb. You want to stay above 50%. If you go lower than that, then you're going back to the original color of the clip itself. So 51% looks good right here. Boom, there we go. As we scrub through, you can see it coming together nicely, huh? So what we want to do next is to continue building out the environment by adding some debris. Let's take this clip for example. If we scrub to the end of it, it's fully destroyed. We can use this portion of the VFX to create the debris we want to see on the ground. So let's trim it, slide it into place, then stretch it back out, and we have to scale it down, move it into position. Okay, so here's a great tip for you. When you're adding green screen elements like VFX to build your scene, you want to make it look realistic as much as possible, right? So for example, a dead giveaway that your scene looks fake or amateur is the connection between the VFX element and the ground. So as you see our Shiro in this environment, she's not casting any shadows, right? So this can break the illusion of the world that you're creating, and trust me, there'll be someone out there who will notice this and wants to call you out on it. Everyone's a film critic. So look at the building and you can see that there's a fine line of the VFX itself connecting with the background image here, right on the ground there. It looks really like a really fine line. So it doesn't look natural or realistic. So it helps to add a VFX layer in front of that, right? So it can match that connection on the ground and create a more realistic feel and chaos in your scene. So now let's copy the tint and apply it to this new VFX clip, adjust the tint values, and we can crank it up a bit. This is looking pretty cool. Let's duplicate the VFX clip we just worked on, place it above, and then move it to the other side of the frame. Boom! It masks the connection of the other building to the ground, looking really good, real sweet, guys. Okay. So as the building crashed down, this scene is building up nicely. Next, we want to add more debris to the grounds. As you see, we have giant debris from the collapsed building, right? So let's add smaller elements of the debris to fill in the spaces as we build towards the foreground. So here I have a VFX folder of debris from the destruction pad. These are like ground explosions. So let's have a look at one of this one, like let's say like debris number 4. As I scrub through it, you can see the rocks all laid out. For this purpose, we want to use the end of the animation. So let's drag and drop this right into our timeline, and we're going to layer it right on top of all the other layers because we want this to be more in the foreground. Here's a nice little editing trick to show you. For this debris effect, we want to keep the back part of it where everything's frozen, but it's kind of too short, right? So if we try to extend the beginning clip, you'll get the full animation in the shot. So let's freeze the end part of this clip. So what you want to do is right click on it and open the options. Now in previous versions of Premiere, there was an option called freeze frames or like freeze, but what we were looking for now is add frame hold. When you click on it, it will split the shot in two. The part that's in the beginning is still animated and the back end of it is frozen now. So let's delete the front part, right, the animated part. And now with the back end, we can extend it all the way back to the beginning of the scene, and you'll see the VFX clip itself is frozen. And in essence, now it's like a PNG image. So now let's position it into the foreground. Let's scale it, place it beneath the debris of the other building that's collapsed already, right? So it looks like it's part of the smoke and rubble as the big rocks cover the ground. This is coming together really nice, so let's move these layers down a notch. Next, we can duplicate what we just did and put it on the left side of the screen to fill in the space. Let's slide the 2 layers up. Copy and paste it, so Command C, Command V for Macs, Control C, Control V for PCs. In the effects control panels, we can click on the motion so we can move the duplicated layer across the screen and into place. What we want to make sure is that we place the VFX clip under the debris from the collapsed building on this side so the rocks looks like it's coming from the debris of this building, right? Blending VFX together is crucial to sell the illusion you're attempting to create. The details matter greatly. Your patience as an editor is the key to your success.
Okay guys, so I just wanted to maybe here just use an example here just to show a quick lesson here. What we want to do is focus in on how we layer some of the VFX files. It's important, right? So we talked about layering things, blending things from the background to the foreground, where it shows blending connections, like how the VFX looks on the layers of the ground. So here we have a real, we're taking this layer here, and what we're doing is moving it down so it can blend into the debris of the crashed building, right? And it looks like it's coming from the building itself. So this way it all looks like one big VFX file versus like, you know, is all being layered up like the way we've been editing, right? So taking this time to see these little details is really important here, right? Because you have the smoke and you have the debris from the big crashed building, but you take the little rubble from the different effects and you blending it together and make it look just sort of like the seamless transition here, right? Where it's blending in nicely and the illusion is being maintained here. All right, guys. All right, so let's get into finishing up the edits on this foreground area, covering up this grass. All right, awesome. Let's come back into our project bin and go into our effects folder here, right? And look for this building here, the house explosion, right? And as we scrub through it, what we want to do is get to the end of this here, right? And we see at the end, at the climax of this particular effects, the debris and the smoke looks great here. And this is the kind of stuff we want to use here. So we're going to take this and just drag and drop it right on top of all our files here. We're going to trim it down. We want the end part of it, right? We don't want the part that's animated. We want the end part of it, and that is looking really good there. So we're going to now add some tint to it. And what we're going to do is go into our effects control here and go into our tint setting and drag and drop it right on top of our file.
And as you can see, even at 100% black and white, it's already looking great, right? And so let's just adjust the tint value just a bit, you know, like say about 90%, that's looking great.
So as for this one, what we want to do is scale it up nice and big here, right? It's in the foreground, so it gets to mask out a lot of the connections that are in the background. So we just sort of adjust it. So that's the great thing about this particular VFX shot right here, is that we're hiding some of the little illusions that are happening there in the background. So just place it right here, looking really good. So right here we have way too much smoke over our Shiro, right? There's a lot of smoke going around. She's sort of being hidden in the smoke. So what we want to do is come to the end of this clip, right? We want to use the very end of it. It's looking good, a little bit less smoke there, and we want to add a frame hole. So right here is about good. Oh, right click, add frame hole. And when we press that, you see that it creates it. We're gonna delete the front part of it and then stretch it all the way out, right? It turns it into like a PNG file right here, and that's looking really good. What's great here, we have a frozen image of our VFX shot here that we can adjust and everything. And as you can see, we have some smoke around our Shiro that kind of makes her more integrated into the scene realistically. But what we don't want to have is too much smoke. This is why we kept the end of the shot. As for the foreground element, we want to add an extra detail that will make it more realistic. What we want to add is a little bit of blur, right? So because whenever you place something in front of your camera, it's a little bit more blurry. It's out of focus compared to what's coming behind it. We want to go back to our effects tab, look for our blur folder and search for the Gaussian blur. And we can drag and drop the Gaussian blur right onto our debris file. Let's crank it up a bit, but not too much. I think that 5% should be enough, or maybe 10%. Yeah, okay, that looks really good right now. So let's keep it at 10%. Now we have this narrow depth of field that looks more realistic. So we can slide this down here a little bit more. Now we're almost done with the scene here, right? So as we scroll through the scene, it's coming together really great. To make this scene pop more, let's add more debris on the ground over here. So let's adjust the debris over here. Let's scale it up a bit, and yeah. So keep in mind, by adding all the little debris on the ground in the foreground, this is what sells the effect, right? It makes it look more realistic. If we were to blind these layers and not have the foreground, not have the debris on the ground, it kind of looks fake, right? So your eyes are trained to see real things. Especially now that we see all these Hollywood blockbuster movies that look super realistic thanks to the CGI, huh? So our eyes are now able to see what's looking fake, what's looking real. Now, usually what Hollywood movies do is add elements, like small elements and details in places your eyes don't tend to look at first. So if we were to remove everything, right, you can see how it's looking a little bit fake, like something's missing.
Now, if you want it, you can still use a shot like this for your short film, and your friends will be like, wow, that's pretty cool. But here at BIGFILMS, we want to make your scene look epic and realistic. That's what we're going for. Okay, so let's unblind all of our layers here, and we want to add as much elements as we can to make our scene more realistic. And boom, see, now we have something epic, and that's what you want. Now here are two things that will help take your scene to the next level. If you're not familiar with adjustment layers, here at BIGFILMS we use them a lot in Premiere, and they're super helpful, right? So for example, if I want to color correct all the elements in this scene, I will have to take each layer one by one to add a color adjustment, and that can take a lot of time. So what we want to do instead is go to our project bin, create a new item, and look for adjustment layer. The setting will pop up, and you want to make sure the size matches your aspect ratio of your sequence. Premiere is usually spot on with this. Press OK, and you'll see the adjustment layer in your project bin. Let's drag and drop on top of all of our layers, trim it to size. As you see, nothing happens. This is a totally transparent layer. You don't have anything. This is equivalent to a glass that you put on your camera that has no filter yet. So here you are free to add things to the adjustment layer. It's the same concept in After Effects. That's great that Premiere made this option available to us. It makes editing life so much easier. To add color to our scene, let's go to our Effects tab, right? We're gonna look for our color correction folder. There's a lot of different options here, but for this scene, we wanna look for the Lumetri color, right? You drag and drop this right into your adjustment layer. Lumetri is a preset that gives you a lot of options and control. You have some basic options. For example, if I want to change the temperature of my shot, so if it's colder, I can make it warmer, right? And you see the whole scene changes. Let's undo this. What we're looking for now here is in the creative section. We open it, scroll down, and we can see these two color wheels. So let's take this for example. We can move the values in the shadow tint to a much greener feel, like how we see a lot in our disaster movies that we love to watch. And for the highlight wheel here, we can push it more towards the yellow. Now sure, I'm overdoing it right now. I just want you to see sort of this extreme level here, how it's changing the color profile in the adjustment layer and affecting all the layers in the scene here, right? But keep in mind, the color and feel for your film is an artistic choice. So it's up to you on how you want to fill in the world that you're creating. Okay, so let's not overdo it here, right? Let's take this back more closer to the center. For this tutorial's sake, that's looking a lot better. Awesome sauce, cool. So now we have all the effects and color grading applied here, right? Next thing we want to do is add some motion to our scene. As you can see, the scene is very static, right? We shot the footage on a tripod, so as our hero is walking through the shot here, the camera itself is not moving because it's locked. What we want to do is add some motion to it by creating a camera movement within the shot itself. Now here's a little sidebar. I often get emails asking us how we create our camera shakes and motions. Now sure, you can use a gimbal or a steady canvas, you know, a Ronin or a drone, and sometimes we do. But believe it or not, for most of our scenes, we lock our camera on a tripod, we film it in static, and then add the motion in post like we're about to do right now. So what we want to do here is click on the adjustment layer, make sure it's selected. Now let's close the Lumetri color menu to clean up our control panel, make things a little bit easier to see here. Now look at the motion control where you have your position. Now pay very close attention here, this is an important step. If you move the position of the adjustment layer, clearly it moves, but it doesn't move all the layers beneath the adjustment layer. So we have to lock all the layers together. So to do that, go to your Effects tab, click on Distort. Select the Transform tool, and you can apply it just by dragging it right into your control panel here, just like this. Now, this gives you the same choices as before with the position and changing the values, but this time, moving the position with the transform applied, it moves all the layers in the shot, like this. And it's like all the layers are merged, just like in Photoshop. Now, we want to zoom in just a little bit so we have some real estate to create our own motion. So for example, right, if you keep it at 100%, if you move the position or anchor points even just a little bit, the edges of the frames are exposed. So you want to zoom in just a bit to about 105%. Now we can adjust and slide a frame over to the left a little, and we will still have some room to play with. Now go to your stopwatch in your effect control panel, click on it, and it'll create a keyframe. Go to the end of your shot in your timeline, move it or slide it over to the right side, and at this point it will automatically create the second keyframe. Now when you play it back, there's some motion in your shot. It's like the camera is moving with our Shiro, and just like that, in post you create an in-camera movement inside your frame there. It makes the entire scene more dynamic, more professional, more epic. It looks way more realistic than keeping it static. And this, my friends, this is how you make big films. And finally, guys, stay tuned to our next tutorial where we're going to teach you how to do camera shakes or in-camera shakes inside your post-production flow here. So we have some great things coming up, from more tutorials in the instruction pack. We have a new VFX pack coming out pretty soon, guys. And I will be building more tutorials in the different variety of packs of combining different, like the MI6 action pack with the ASTRA pack, combining different effects from different packs in a really nice explosive tutorial to teach you some really basic and advanced steps. So guys, we can't wait to see you again. Thank you so much for all your support and believing in Big Films and helping us build an incredible community. And always remember, you are what you write, you are what you shoot, you are what you edit. So with that said, go out there and make big films.